This is Michael Lee. I'm the president of the Museum of Chinese in America. Today's date is February 12th, 2025. And we are here at the Museum of Chinese in America, and I'm here with Amy Wu. And we are here to talk about Amy's career, personal motivations, the impact of her work, offering insights into her vision from farms to incubators, and her broader perspectives on women in agriculture and technology. So, welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael, for having me.
No, it's so great to have you here. But just to warm up and to get started, I mean, we met through your sister. And so I just thought like a nice kind of warm-up question for you would be, can you tell me a little bit about your family and a little bit about your early background, growing up with your sister and your parents?
Yeah, well, my sister and I are ABCs, American-born Chinese, and we grew up in the suburbs of New York. Live New York is her advocacy and passion because she is a two-time kidney transplant recipient and also competes as a swimmer. We're both swimmers, but she also competes in the transplant games. So, with her passion is to share her story, her own journey as somebody who's received a transplant, and also to advocate for others to consider donating organs because there's such a shortage. So I think she and I actually have something in common. We both have a passion and something that we really love to advocate for. So we grew up in the suburbs, and then are basically New Yorkers. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
How did your parents come about picking swimming as a hobby for you both?
They didn't pick swimming as a hobby for us. I just love swimming. I grew up obviously part of the the YMCA, going through all the different levels of being taught how to swim, but it wasn't until I was in my 20s, I would have to say, that I discovered a group of master swimmers. That's U.S. Master Swimming. They looked like they were having a great time. They had friends with each other. They said they competed. And ever since then, I kind of joined them. I was in upstate New York, and they said to me, Amy, you should just join us. And then since then, I've been open water swimming, and also, I should talk about my open water swimming separately maybe, but I've done swims in the Hudson River and also around Manhattan.
That's incredible. Well. And you've won a competition before. I
have won a competition. I can't remember what I won.
Was it the Manhattan Island Marathon swim?
Right. So when I lived in New York City, there was a segment of my career in my life where I lived in Manhattan, and I also went to school in Manhattan. I should say I went to NYU and I went to Columbia at different times in my life. But the bottom line is, I think somebody joked around and said that you should watch an episode of Kramer when he was swimming the East River, and he jumped in and swam, and I said, do you think that's even possible? And they said, well, there's a Manhattan Island swim series. So I joined a bunch of people, and I got into a 1-mile race in Battery Park City, and I just loved it. It was a beautiful summer day. The water was actually really lovely. I remember not being able to see anything in the water, but I remember that the water was warm. It was lovely, the Hudson River. And I had a great time. It was a really wonderful community, and I kind of got addicted to open water swimming in that season of my life. I did the Statue of Liberty swim, Governor's Island. I did all of this as fun, and people would just go, yeah, you can do it, you can do it. I never thought more than that. And then the Manhattan Island swim in 2009 was one where a group of us were like, you know what, we should just try it, we should do it. And it's 26.6 miles.
Incredible.
Around the Manhattan, like the race says. And I think the beauty of it was that I didn't think twice about just doing it or how to do it. I was swimming regularly and training regularly at Asphalt Green. And the story here is that, Michael, the first year we did not succeed, actually. So we were a little bit, the current got us a little bit. We were really a little bit behind. So we had to be pulled the first year.
How frightening was that?
Wasn't so much frightening as a big disappointment, because it was just that we did not make the timing of the current. So a bunch of us, probably the other 50% of people who didn't make that were pulled. But then the very fast people were off. But I think this is a little bit of my character. Two of us on the team said there's unfinished business is what we called it. So unfinished business meant that I wanted to do it again, and I wanted to complete it. So the next year, we did try it again with a group of different people, and we completed it in about like less than 10 hours, I would say. And it was wonderful because you don't get to see Manhattan often from the vantage point of like the water. The water isn't so terrible. Like I said, I never saw anything crazy in the Hudson River. It was really just beautiful. Yeah.
10 hours of swimming, I can't imagine. What did it feel like when you completed it?
Well, it felt really wonderful. We worked as a team. There were 4 of us, and we had strategy. And like I said, we had a great kayaker. I think the kayaker makes all the difference. You know, it's kind of like a North Star. So I think the lessons that I took from that is just to like go with the adventure and to not overthink it too much, but to yet like, you know, just and enjoy it's a joint team effort when you have something like that, you know, as well.
Well, they say individual sports set you up for success. So can you talk a little bit about your career and, you know, kind of did swimming help you out through that?
Well, my career, without me really planning it, has been as a journalist and as a storyteller. When I was in my, the way I got into it was an English school teacher when I was in 8th grade gave us an assignment to write a letter to the editor. We were to pick a topic that we really were passionate about. I picked Earth Day. I wrote about it, the letter got published, and I actually remember cutting it out, and my dad was really proud, and you know, I think it was framed even, and I remember thinking, gosh, I really love this. I can express my voice and my opinion, have it published, have other people discuss it, and maybe I can make a living off of this. So briefly, in my teens, I actually thought I could make a living off of being a letter to the editor-writer. I ended up writing hundreds of letters. From the time I was probably 13 to 17 years old. And my hobby, I want to say, was writing letters. New York Times, LA Times, Newsday, a lot of the days when legacy media was huge. I remember literally having the word processor, writing it on a word processor and putting it in a manila envelope, and it would be sent out. So the records will show that I had at least 10 letters published in the New York Times.
Incredible.
And a good number published in other places.
These were opinion letters?
Opinion letters. I would read an article. Often it was associated maybe with youth. You know, for example, like there was a Take Our Daughters to Work Day that launched at the time. You know, some of them were very big news stories, like an 18-year-old caught up in Singapore who, you know, was arrested for chewing gum. They were usually youth-related stories, and I would comment on them. And I would write the letter, and my dad would send them. And there were a lot of letters sent out, but ultimately a good number were also published. But I discovered that you can't make a living off of letters to the editor. So a teacher said, you got to become a reporter and a journalist, maybe explore it. So I started to write for the local paper in my teens, and into college at NYU, I worked in the Washington Square News. And I would say it's my inquisitivity and curiosity that really drove my career. I love learning about new things and people. I often, my sister jokes that I'm a walking Y. She just says the letter Y, but it's a Y. And I loved the experiences of every day was very new. I would, so the way my career really started was after writing for the local paper in high school, my junior and senior year, they had a youth page. I went to NYU, got a bit involved in the newspaper there, but I applied for a bunch of internships. You know, internships were really a big thing back then in print media. And I remember, once again, applying to hundreds of internships. They were super competitive. I mean, we're talking about, you know, the big ones, New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Miami Herald. Every state had a really awesome newspaper. So my first summer, freshman year, I got an internship at People magazine, and the highlight was going to Woodstock, Saugerties, and covering that along with a photographer. Following year, I got an internship at the Miami Herald, and then following year, Chicago Tribune. So I built up my career as a newspaper reporter, and that's how it all started. And I thought, one day I'm going to become a foreign correspondent, because I had a great interest in traveling and seeing the world. I also speak Mandarin Chinese, as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up speaking both Mandarin, Chinese, and also English. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll be sent one day to Beijing or Tokyo, or I thought like just different places. And that was my goal, was to be a foreign correspondent at the time.
Looking
So
back,
I was a young reporter. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, looking back at your journalistic career, like, what do you think was the pinnacle, or what do you think is the most thing that you're proud of?
Well, there's a number of milestones. I think number one is when I was right after college, I decided to go to Hong Kong, because the big news in 1995 and 1996 was Hong Kong being given back from British to mainland China. So as a history major, as someone passionate about modern Chinese history, the story is that my first job was in Norfolk, Virginia. I was given a job as a reporter, a cub reporter, and I spent 2 months there, but I said, no, the newspaper was wonderful, the people were wonderful, but I said, you know what, I gotta go to Hong Kong. I gotta go see the handover. So I ended up writing quite a few letters to editors and just telling them I'm available for anything, an internship. I just wanted a work visa, is what I really wanted. So a bit of serendipity, I guess, an editor who did Asia Week and Time Asia at the time took a chance on me and gave me a work visa. And in 1997, I basically in the autumn went right to Hong Kong. I think it was 96 actually that I went straight to Hong Kong and began to work as a researcher, fact checker. And the highlight of my time at the publication was being sent to cover the handover and stand on the border between Hong Kong and Shenzhen and count the number of PLA, what's it called? I want to say trucks, but really tanks that were coming in.
Interesting.
And I was only 21 at the time.
And were there a lot of tanks that went across?
There were a lot of tanks that came across, and it's just a fascinating time because my relatives, my grandparents at the time were alive in Hong Kong, a lot of them had immigrated to Canada 2 years ago before that I arrived. So I didn't actually have a lot of family members when I went to Hong Kong. They all went to Canada. So I think it's a little bit ironic that while they left, I went.
Right.
But that was one of my highlights. And then another highlight in my career was my time at Columbia Journalism School. I continued to work as a journalist in Hong Kong and as a business journalist, a financial journalist. But another dream of mine was to get my master's degree at Columbia. And it had to be Columbia Journalism School, of course, because I said, I really love the school. It's still one of the best in journalism, but at the time I think that it was maybe it was really just tough to get in, and it was like a big deal. So I applied to journalism school at Columbia and got in, and a highlight of my time at Columbia was my master's thesis. My master's advisor, Bruce Porter, who himself has done amazing work as an investigative journalist. When it came time to almost graduate, he said, you got to do your master's thesis. And I said to myself, well, how about doing something related to garment factories? And as I said, I speak enough conversational Mandarin Chinese, and I proposed, because I spent so much time in the city at the time, Columbia is also in Manhattan, I just kind of thought to myself at one point, I'm wearing these shirts, who's producing them? And then I said, somebody is sewing these, about garment factories. He said, great idea. I said, you know what, I think I'll call up, I made a list of sources, maybe the labor unions, maybe I'll try to get a source who works in the factory, I'll interview them at a cafe. He said, do you speak, man? I thought you spoke some Chinese. I said, I do. He said, go get a job in one. So,
interesting.
I basically, I don't know nothing about garments and sewing. And I was arguing with him a little bit. I said, I just don't think it's possible. What is this? The schedule. He said, go get a job in garment factories. So I remember at the time, because this was in the early 2000s now, there were still garment factories in Manhattan, and also, of course, like Queens and different places. So I spoke enough Chinese where I talked to some people, and they were like, well, there's a factory there, go up there. I remember literally walking up to the door of one of the factories and knocking and saying, I'm looking for work. And because my Chinese was good enough, they kind of chit-chatted with me and said, yeah, we do have some work, but do you have any experience? No. Well, I could teach you. So I chit-chatted my way in to one of the factories, and the story is I did get a job in one of the factories. And the story that I told them, because they kind of looked at me and didn't believe that a young person would want to get a job in a garment factory. They kept saying, why?
Right.
And I remember telling them, well, I'm really interested in fashion. Really, really interested, and I was. And I remember, the scissors were so unique, the intricacies of this, and I didn't know how to work nothing of it. I sat there and I chit-chatted with some of them, and they were trying to teach me how, and the bottom line is I got fired.
Wow.
A few weeks later.
Do you remember what you got fired
I
for?
don't remember how to cut the thread the right way. I think I kind of fumbled through that, and you get paid maybe it was like 5 cents a thread or something, or a few pennies, and I basically did very poorly.
Wow.
So I was told to please leave, and I didn't have my own sewing kit either.
Interesting. Did you meet a lot of the other workers while you were in that experience? Do you remember any stories?
I remember meeting chit-chatting with some of the workers. They were all women, mostly women, 98% women. But I got fired, and then I was like, oh gosh, I think that this is not going to work. But my mother who lives in Queens, had a contact, and the woman worked in the garment factory. This was in Flushing, this was in the Queens area. She connected me, and I ended up going to that factory regularly. And they kind of knew that I was doing research. They knew that I wasn't just there to work. So I did a long story about the ins and outs of the garment factory, and telling the stories about the women who had worked there for decades, some of them, but don't speak a word of English, and about their challenges they faced and the opportunities they faced, but mostly the challenges they faced. What goes into your $50 shirt, but it ended up enacting some change, because I think the factory was owned by, they were doing work for a certain designer. And I ended up, it did get published, and I did win something at Columbia for it. And I think that it's a highlight because it really is a common thread in my career, is to tell undertold stories and not told stories often. So that was another highlight. But the third highlight is women in food and farming, women who are the innovators in creating the technologies to help farmers.
Yeah, let's go into that.
So that
did your Earth Day letter inspire you to go into the farming industry later on?
No, but now that I think of it, it's kind of amazing, right? It kind of is a full circle now that I think of it. Did not think of it that way. How I ended up in California and the Salinas is kind of a long story too, but the common thread, when you ask what are the highlights of my career, I would say the garment factory, but then the next one that I didn't even plan was being asked if I wanted to go to Salinas, California to be a reporter for a local paper called The Californian. And Steinbeck country, beautiful place, but 90% of the industry there is agriculture. Like, it's mostly lettuce fields, all kinds of lettuce, by the way. So I was a reporter there, I lived there. And I just was taken aback by the amount of agriculture. I mean, literally, it was like you would drive, every corner you would turn on the street, you'd be driving into like a field. Thousands of acres, and beautiful. I actually found a lot of beauty in it. But I noticed there were not a lot of women at the running agribusinesses, at the leading farms. And yet I was thinking women already play such a big role in agriculture. I would go to farming meetings, all white men. And I would be the only woman often, and the only woman certainly of color. So there was a silence when I first was there, because I was an outsider. I'm not even from Salinas, I didn't come from generations of farming families. But as a reporter and a journalist, my job was to cover the story. So I would go and I just observed this. So about 8 months after in my job, there was a call out from the International Center for Journalists. A friend told me about it. She said they're looking for stories of minority women in business. And I had never applied for a grant before, and there was something in me that just said, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna apply. I said that let me do stories, profiles of minority women, women innovators in ag tech. And ag tech was at the time something that nobody knew anything about. It was like you were
Yeah,
talking
can you
about.
tell us what ag tech
Yeah.
is?
So ag tech is agriculture and technology. It's any kind of innovation, new kind of innovation that helps farmers tackle challenges like, I'll give examples, blockchain, AI, drones, sensors, drones that can help irrigate the fields, drones that can take pictures of the fields, mobile apps that can help monitor your workers in the field, blockchain that actually connects the vegetables in the field to what's on the shelf. So, but there was a whole generation of women I discovered, young women actually from science, technology, engineering, and math, who were the innovators for these technologies to help farmers. So I said, let me put my hat in the ring and write this grant, and I ended up getting it. I proposed it as a documentary and written stories. So to make a long story short, in 2 or 3 months, I found several women. It was not easy finding the women, but I found 3 women who shared their stories. I and a videographer put together, I directed and produced a documentary with a videographer, and the stories were published. And after this project was completed, we had a screening at the Western Growers Center for Innovation Technology, where a lot of the big growers are based. We invited the farmers, the big farmers, big government people, big community leaders, educators, and of course the women in film. And I moderated it, and I showed the film for the first time, and there was just a silence after this documentary. And I was like, oh man, maybe it's just really bad. And I just remember saying, are there any questions? And then hands began to just raise. There was a sea of hands saying, I had no idea there was this generation, there's women doing this. Like, this is amazing. And the women said, can you do us a favor and connect us? We want to meet other women. So from there, I couldn't give up the story, is the story. The project was finished, the grant was completed. I couldn't let it go because I felt like there were more and more voices of women in food and farming doing amazing things to really help contribute to the food that we're eating. There is a growing population. There's a lack of farmable land, and yet they're creating this as a solution. And I couldn't let it go, so I said I'm going to write another grant, and I got another grant from the International Women's Media Foundation to continue the project, collected more stories, and then I pushed to do a book for the first time too. And the book came out in 2021, and it's called From Farms to Incubators, Women Innovators Revolutionizing How Our Food is Grown. And I collected, in the end, 30 stories, women of all different backgrounds and ages and expertise, who use photographs and their own oral histories to share their journey, their own personal biographies of why would they start something like that when they didn't come from families that were entrepreneurs. Why would they do this if they have nobody in their family who farms? What are the challenges they face in fundraising and having people believe in their innovation, in having farmers? So I told the stories in a book that ended up really becoming very visual centric, and that was published in 2021. And since then, I feel that that project has morphed into more than a personal passion. It's kind of grown into now education and training and mentoring a new generation of youth and young people to send out a message that farming is not just about tractors and overalls. It may not sound sexy, but there's so many opportunities for you in food and farming. So in the past 2 years, I turned From Farms to Incubators into its own organization. It was through a lot of discussion with people who were mission aligned, who said that to continue to tell the stories, turn your project into a nonprofit, into a 501c3. And again, it's another first. It's kind of like it's morphed into something I didn't expect. And then in the past year, I'm proud to say that through, again, I call it serendipity, but so much more I think goes behind it, maybe the timing. Ended up doing a collaboration with a group of researchers and academics at the University of California, Merced. They got a grant to create an AI-generated crop irrigation system for almonds. And I joined this project and got a little bit of that grant. And I and a group of young people are the storytelling arm for that technology. So I train them how to tell stories, how to research people, how to interview, how to ask questions, how to do things without ChatGPT.
So easy now.
How to take photos, how to take video. I share all my foundational journalism skills with these young people who are sophomores and juniors in college. They don't have any background in journalism. They don't have any background in ag tech, but they get to connect with the researchers. They get to also learn about storytelling. And I brought in a whole guest speaker series. We had 5 women last semester on Zoom, rock stars in ag tech, who did talks with these young people. So I feel like the storytelling has been my career. Curiosity, my inquisitivity in always learning about people and learning about their stories and learning about new things has driven this. I never feel like there's a dull moment because I'm always very curious and inquisitive.
It sounds like there's a lot of stories to be told. What do you hope the impact of
So that's how the Farms to Incubators was born.
Yeah, what do you think the impact from the Farms to Incubators will be?
I hope the impact will be that there will be a generation of young youth and young people who understand that there are a lot of career pathways and opportunities for them in fields that they may have never thought about. I use Farms to Incubators as a platform to obviously spotlight food and farming and innovation. But on the other hand, I'm also using that as a platform to showcase storytelling and to tell the young people who have honestly look at me like, really, I can tell stories and I can, yes, if you are inquisitive, you like to amplify a mission for an organization, maybe your own mission, yes, good communication skills are also really critical to communicating science, technology, innovation, or whatever you're passionate about. I can replace the word ag tech with what they're passionate about, but I use it because it's obviously something that I feel very strongly about as well, that the food that we eat and the farmers that are growing the food really should get more attention than they do, is true. Yeah.
That's really
So I
interesting.
hope that the menteeship program will take off. I hope that the stories will be preserved ultimately. We have video stories and we have audio stories. I hope one day to give over all those stories to a institution that focuses on food and farming and agriculture and have them archive it so that if there are researchers or just people who want to look back on researching women in food and farming, they will find this collection. Yeah, that's my ultimate goal. But I hope that 50 years from now or 60 years from now, there will already be a lot of women everywhere leading, part of the landscape, whether they sit on the boards or run the agribusinesses. So maybe they'll look back on history and just find the whole thing fascinating because the landscape will have changed. Yeah.
Okay, we're here back with Amy Wu here at the Museum of Chinese America. My name is Michael Lee. I'm the president here, and today's date is February 12th, 2025. So Amy, we were talking before and you were saying how much you wanted Asian Americans to get into storytelling. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, in looking at the broad scope of my own life and career so far is that I came from a family where the majority of my family members took a more traditional, I would have to say a more traditional route within Chinese American families. My father is a professor and he loved his profession, but beyond that, we sort of have a huge, I come from a culture where, you know, Asian Americans are supposed to be, let's just say, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. There were certain career pathways that were more, you know, are more, I don't want to call them normal, but within the norm. So I am the only person in my own family that's a journalist and who's a storyteller. And I became very involved with the Asian American Journalists Association once I was in college at NYU, and actually when I lived in Asia, was very involved, you know, in building up the Asian chapter. So I guess another theme of my career that I want to say is that for younger, I always want to send out a message that for especially younger people that there's a huge value in communications, and whether or not you choose to be a journalist or a communications professional or marketing or public relations or videography, documentary, podcaster, screenwriter, if you want to communicate, if you have a talent and a love and a passion for it, and also hopefully it aligns with your, maybe a cause that you have or something you believe in, well, go for it. I mean, I feel like, I feel very strongly about that. I feel like I'm kind of living proof that one can also do it if you are good at it and follow that path as well.
Now, you mentioned before that you worked at A Magazine, which here at the museum we view that as one of the first serious publications that Asian Americans had editorial control over. What was that experience like?
Working for A Magazine and writing for A Magazine?
Writing for A Magazine.
Yeah, I mean, that was extraordinary. It's one of the first, the Asian American publications, including A Magazine and Asian Week. I actually give them a lot of credit for giving a young writer and a young journalist their start. I mean, I was super passionate. As I said, I wrote hundreds of letters to the editor, but actually, now that I look upon it, it was the Asian American publications where I had my first start, as I would have to say, actively contributing. I remember for Asian Week, weekly, I wrote a column for them from New York. And I gotta dig it up, those columns. But I remember they were based in San Francisco, Asian Week, and I was in New York, and I remember they wanted that. They wanted a column. And I was like thinking to myself, they're not just telling me, hey, you're too young, you know, we need to have you do another internship. They were keen on it. So they gave me the clips, they gave me the opportunity to get in the door even more. And A Magazine was just extraordinary because I was working with some really awesome journalists who I really look up to. You know, as a young journalist, I think Jeff Yang, you know, and other writers, high caliber editors and reporters and journalists. And for the first time, I also thought from a younger age, hey, you can start something of your own. Like, I didn't know the details of how it was started, A Magazine. All I knew was like, this didn't exist before, and now it exists, and somebody started it. And it's really awesome to give me a chance to just jump in and write. And I think it sent out a really positive message without me kind of thinking about it too much. That my skills as a storyteller are really valued, and there's also a place and a space to amplify the good work and the contributions of Asian Americans. And I remember walking into bookstores, and maybe it's Barnes and Nobles, and seeing A Magazine there, and being like, hey, look, it's just part of, like, it's huge, it's out there. So it was a lot of positive energy and that I got from it that kind of fueled me continuing to be a journalist. I feel like if those publications may not have existed and I didn't have the opportunities and there wasn't so much enthusiasm and saying, yeah, we want your stories, we want you to write more. Who knows, at the age of 23 or 24, I may have been like, yeah, you know what, I'm not gonna move forward on this anymore. Forget it, you know. So I actually give a lot of credit to the mentors and the editors and the journalists who paved a pathway, who were pioneers. Because I think the ripple effect and the impact that was made is tremendous. And you know, sometimes you never know, right, the people that you impact, but it did impact me.
Yes.
Yeah.
We just featured Asian Week and A Magazine in the exhibition here at the museum. Did seeing the exhibition, did it bring back any old feelings?
It brought back like feelings like, wow, are we still like in this? It's so strange seeing it like that it was 20 years ago or more. You know, because when I stood there and I looked at the covers, to me they're so familiar because I did write for them and I knew the people who who ran it, and I was like, oh wait, I'm just surrounded by like what I know. And then I realized, wow, it's now a part of history. And it's in a beautiful exhibition, and that's such rich history, you know, from that. But it brought back kind of a hunger in a way to say, gosh, why we need maybe, is there a place for more of this, you know, or will there be a time when we see this happening again, that there are more periodicals, or they could be digital, that actually you know, spotlight or amplify the good work of Asian Americans and the lives they live. Yeah.
We're so lucky to have those as platforms. So now you're giving platforms to stories of women in color.
Yeah.
Women of color, I apologize.
Yeah.
Are there any standout stories that pop out in your mind that you could share?
Yeah, there are so many stories that pop out in my mind, but I think a couple, you know, from the book, and I have been following the women even after the book has been published and the movie comes out, because I feel like lives always are evolving, and it's curious to me to see where they're going to end up. I mean, one of the stories that continued to inspire me was a young woman, the first in her family to go to college, and her parents were field workers in Mexico, and she grew up in Salinas, California, and ended up going to college for engineering and computer science, and started to work at a startup for an ag tech company, like you know, imparting her talents. And basically, why is it inspiring is because I think partway into her job, and she was doing great, her father, who's again, not a field worker and so forth, living in another city, got stage 3 cancer, and she ended up having, deciding to leave her job and to move back with her family. She had 9 brothers and sisters, to move back to help out the family, and to actually use her skills in ag tech and to help her own family farm. They were also farming at a much lower scale, you know, livelihood of making a living, and she used her own talents to help out the family farm and also care for her family as well. So in the stories of that, for example, I feel like the women that I have met and told the stories of, they're not only doing it to making money. You know, obviously every entrepreneur, you got to make a living, you want to be successful, you want to build your team. But I feel like they're doing it also because they want to tackle big problems, big issues, and leave a better world for their next generation. There really is that. The love for conservation and health and wellness, that's baked into sort of why they're doing this as well. And also a real love for their staying connected with their culture, I find, as well. You know, no matter what, whether it be traveling back to their own original country, whether they were born there or their parents were born there, to share their knowledge. You know, there's another woman that's from Vietnam, and she developed a way to extract oil from a fruit called the red melon that's mostly grown in Southeast Asia, and very high in beta carotene, you know, and it addresses eye issues, malnutrition issues in Vietnam. Well, she did this all at UC Davis, and she is a rock star in her own world, but she goes back to Vietnam, and she really imparts her knowledge and what she's learned with farmers there and with people there. So I feel like there's that aspect that I really, really love from all the women that I've really met. That's very inspirational. I mean, I feel like they've all climbed Everest. I mean, it is not easy. It's tough getting funding. Tough is really highlighted and bolded. I mean, to get anything from venture capitalists, often they have to go other routes. You know, they're writing from grants to angel investors, and relentlessly continuing to grow this on their own with really a skeletal team sometimes. So I also feel like along with them on my journey, I've also climbed Everest at times. You know, folks asking me, why are you even doing this? What's your purpose in telling these stories? Why do you want to do this? It's not even that hot of a topic, maybe agriculture. Maybe you could, write about something else. I really believe that sometimes it's very hard to explain why we're passionate about things. not being able to totally explain it is fine with me, you know, but I feel like in continuing to do the work that I've done, I not only inspire women and young people in the field, but people overall. In the audiences that I've talked to, there's entrepreneurs in general. I mean, like recently I moderated a session at the Computer Electronics Show. I mean, that is definitely not all agriculture, it's everything imaginable. And in talking about some of this project with our entrepreneurs, they're inspired. I mean, they're like, yeah, we climb up the same Everest, you know, and their stories, it's not all about the ag tech, it's really about their personal bios and their personal stories as well.
Right, looking at this unique landscape, what do you think the future is for women in the ag tech industry?
I think it's positive. I see things turning in a very positive direction. And it's because in observing and documenting this over the years, I've seen more and more the money flowing into ag tech startups that are co-led or led by women is growing. The number of women sitting on the boards of agribusinesses is also, it's incremental, but it's moving towards a certain direction as well, upwards. I also see a real positive in that universities, like in California, is probably a pioneer, but I also see it in New York, are launching ag tech programs. It's happening over the last 2 years, and they are basically officially putting it now with young, like planting it in the minds of young people that we have an official program now that's a career pathway for you. And these are big programs now. We might be talking about majors and minors next, but I see this happening on a pretty fast-growing scale now, and I also see that there's a love of successful entrepreneurs to mentor the next generation and to speak about their stories, to share about their stories. All of the women, 98% of the entrepreneurs that I've met have themselves said to me, if I can share my story further with the next generation, please let me help. And it's not of asking them of anything. They really want to give an opportunity to their next generation, whether it be their daughters, their grandkids, their nieces. You know, they're looking ahead. So I see it as a positive, but on the other hand, I also see a lot of challenges in the landscape. I feel the challenges are that we need more support on a grander scale. We need to include everybody. Everybody needs to be involved. Men, women, young people, older people of a different vintage, intergenerational. I feel like everybody's contribution is really important, and it's not just for it's not just women that need to be involved in this or girls. I mean, it's really a whole movement. It takes a lot of support to keep it going. Yeah.
I'm really happy that From Farms to Incubators is giving them this platform to be able to share it with future generations.
Yeah.
Incredible. Just some personal questions for you, and just to wrap things up. You know, what was the significance to you to be included in Worth Magazine's Groundbreakers 2020 list of 50 women changing the world?
I certainly didn't expect that, and it was really an honor to be included, you know, with another a group of folks who are rock stars in their own worlds, you know, in all different industries. I was surprised to see that actually. Yeah, I don't think too much about these sometimes, because I'm just kind of like feeling like I'm busy doing the work and always trying to kind of like, you know, get more support or do more programming. So when I saw that accolade, I was obviously very, very happy and proud of it. And also, I feel like it gives a little bit more attention to the cause itself. You know, that we need more. We need to spotlight more amazing women, you know, in the field. Yeah. So that's the bigger goal, I think. Yeah.
Great. And then going back to your sister, who's an organ donor advocate,
yeah.
What was it like growing up with her and seeing her journey?
She is an amazing woman in her own right in all different ways. And I feel like both of us have actually that in common, that we are both using our talents and skills to advocate in beautiful ways. I mean, for her, it's public speaking. She enjoys connecting with people and sharing her story. She's also written a book. She's written a book about her own journey as an organ transplant recipient. She's inspirational because she and I both love to swim, and she swims for the transplant games. And I've gone to the transplant games with her before. 4 years ago, I went to Salt Lake City where they had it, and I continue to be inspired by her. And I think that we kind of just inspire each other to continue to go out there and tell our stories, not only our stories, but in my case, other people's stories, with a mission in mind that if we don't tell these stories, nobody would really, I kind of feel like nobody would really know about some of them, or know about the topics, or even talk about it. I think you have to always kind of keep the fire going. It's a little bit like, the campfires when I was a kid, Girl Scouts, you have the fire going, but it always takes more wood, takes something else to just keep it going. And that's the way that I kind of see her work and my work and our passions, is that there always needs to be a more, and whether or not somebody else puts in the wood or you put in more wood, it's constant to keep that fire going until the day that it's like, okay, we have a formula now. It's going to keep going itself a little bit. So how was it like seeing her journey? Is like her journey continues. She is also very active in speaking, public speaking, sharing her stories with nonprofit organizations. She's an advocate. I think she writes about her own stories too. And in that sense, we have a lot in common, because although the causes are different, the grander vision of wanting to use our talents and skills and our experiences to contribute is really very much a glue that kind of holds us together. So, but I appreciate that question, because I've never been asked that. And I would say that, and like I said, we have swimming in common as well, and she's also supportive of what I do as well. She's a writer, I'm a writer, and we go to each other's talks and we share each other's stories. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Shameless plug. So, why do you enjoy coming to the Museum of Chinese in America?
Well, I absolutely love the greater mission. I have a passion for history. I'm a history major, and I've always thought that if the stories are not preserved, that they will just disappear, and actually will disappear. So ever since I was younger, I've always wanted to preserve the stories of my own stories, but my family's stories. So my combination of curiosity, inquisitivity, love of culture, of Chinese American culture, kind of is combined, I feel, with it kind of aligns very directly with what you're doing. I feel like what your mission is speaks to what I love. So the programming, amplifying the culture, creating community, with activities, events, keeping that alive, keeping that going, fostering that, but also the amazing richness of the oral history project and preserving that totally aligns with what I believe in. For the past 4 years, I have been officially having a date with my father where I record his, where I interview him and where I ask him a question and where he responds. And I did that to preserve our family history, but also not only his personal history, but a greater vision that, someday somebody will look at this oral history and be like, well, that was what it was like being an immigrant, from Hong Kong to Shanghai, all the way to Canada and the US. It's an immigrant story, but then there's the richness of an individual story within that. And I think, why is that important? Because I always look ahead and I think of the future generations, and who knows what the future will be like, but I do know there will be generations long after we're gone, and I often think, hopefully, some of those young people will want to study history and will want to reach back into history to kind of get clues as to what we are today. And I hope that they will reach into those stories and they will listen, and they will look at the photographs, they'll look at the videos, they'll listen to the oral histories, and it'll inspire them to continue to tell stories of Chinese Americans and Asian Americans in whatever year that may be, 50 years from now, 60 years from now, 100 years from now. I feel like Asian Americans and Chinese Americans, I'm a Chinese American, we've contributed, our history is very unique. We've contributed a great deal to the US, but we come from a rich history because our ancestors are from all over the place, sprinkled throughout the Asia Pacific. So to not have this preserved and to cultivate it, I think would be a real shame. So I think that everything that the museum is about is something that I really believe in, which is why I visited and I will continue to visit, and I really support the good work of the museum.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you ever want us to take a look at your father's interviews and archive them here, please do let us take a look. I believe that's all the questions that I have. Were there any points that I didn't touch upon in the interview that you would like to talk about?
No, I think that we pretty much covered a lot.
Yeah, you did an amazing job taking us through the entire journey and talking about your career and hearing about a little bit about your personal background.
Yeah.
So, no, thank you. This was a great interview. I had a lot of fun doing this.